Welcome, everyone, to today's presentation. My name is Terry Weber, and I am with the UK Work-Life Elder Care Program. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, former Wisconsin governor from my home state, Marty Schreiber. Marty is a fierce advocate for those caring for a loved one with dementia. He himself was a caregiver for his wife, Elaine, for nearly 20 years. After Elaine moved into memory care, Marty wrote a book, My Two Elaines, Learning, Coping, and Surviving as an Alzheimer's Caregiver. I don't know if you guys can see that. Well, okay, kind of. But today Marty is with us, and he's going to talk about his book, and he's going to talk about his experience as a caregiver, the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of it. If you have any questions for Marty, please just type those into the chat box as we go along, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So, without further delay, it is my honor to introduce Marty Schreiber.
Well, thank you, Terry. It's a great pleasure for me to be with University of Kentucky. We, for everyone who joined us, Azetta and I and Terry were talking, and I, don't know a whole lot about Kentucky. I don't even know if you have a basketball team. I think you do, but anyway, we'll see. We've got Marquette University basketball here, and it'll be sort of fun when. Anyway, so I'm very pleased to be with you, and for all of you involved in caregiving and taking care of loved ones, you're heroes, you're wonderful, beautiful people, and it's a tough job. So I'm just so pleased to be here. Thank you. So what I did, as Terry pointed out, wrote the book My Two Elaines, and it's learning, coping, and surviving as an Alzheimer's caregiver. And it's really based on the principle that if there is one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease. And when I say ignorance of the disease, I mean by the medical profession, I mean by we caregivers, but also friends, neighbors, relatives, employers, bankers. This is not what you call a chicken casserole disease. Hypothetically speaking, if I have a knee replacement and I can't get around and I'm tied up, bedridden, people will bring me a chicken casserole. If hypothetically I have open heart surgery and I can't get around, people will bring me a chicken casserole. Now my wife has Alzheimer's, and because they are ignorant of the disease, they don't know what to say, they don't know how to act, and because of that, they withdraw. And because they withdraw, the life of a caregiver becomes even more challenging because it becomes even more lonely. But in addition to that, in addition to the loneliness is the feeling that I may be being deserted. And that ends up being a very, very tough situation. So if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. And what I began to learn too late, but hopefully a little bit on time, was the fact that I cannot beat this disease head on. Alzheimer's 20 years ago, when Elaine was diagnosed, couldn't be cured or prevented. Today, Alzheimer's cannot be cured or prevented. So we know that we cannot fight this disease head on at this moment in time. But what we can do is we can make a very realizable goal, and that would be to help our loved one and ourselves live our best lives possible. Now, how do we help our loved one live their best life possible? As far as my situation was, and I'm going to guess in many situations, we help our loved one live their best life possible by joining their world. Because as long as I tried to keep Elaine in my world, as long as Elaine, it didn't happen on a Thursday, it happened on a Friday. It wasn't the Smiths, it was the Joneses. The fact of the matter is, why did you have to put the car keys in the dishwasher? Why are you asking me the same? I have to understand that Elaine's mind is changing. And once I began to understand to join her world, it made life a lot easier and a lot better for both of us. And when I say joining their world, I'll give you an example. Elaine asked me once how her parents were. Excuse me. And I said, Elaine, your parents are both dead. And the shock on her face when she realized that maybe she didn't say goodbye, much less attend the funeral. Well, I promised I would never put her through that again. And so next time she asked me, how are my parents? Oh, I said, Elaine, I said, your mom is doing great. She likes working at church and your dad likes his sports. Elaine said, oh, that makes me feel so good. That makes me feel good. Well, that's what I call therapeutic fibbing. Therapeutic fibbing. There's two things I want you to know about therapeutic fibbing. One is I tried it the first year of marriage, and it didn't work so good. But then the other aspect of therapeutic fibbing, and not everyone believes this, but if you go back into the Old Testament and you review the 10 Commandments, you know, Moses went up into the mountain and then he came back down with the tablets of stone, the 10 Commandments. Well, because I was there, I can report to you very directly. Although the front of the tablets were written in Arabic, a type of language, if you look at the back of those tablets, you will see where it was written in pure English for particularly the University of Kentucky people to read. It was written in pure English that therapeutic fibbing is good, and therapeutic fibbing maybe is advisable, and therapeutic fibbing may really help people live their best lives possible. Well, how else to help Elaine live her best life possible? Let's assume hypothetically that, well, it was not hypothetical. It's 9:30 in the morning. Elaine wants a glass of wine. Elaine, you can't have it. It's 9. That's not the answer. Do you want red wine or white wine? Do you, for example, want to make sure that you drink it with your sisters, or do you want to drink it with your neighbors and so forth? And so redirection, to understand we can't fight this disease head on. And so redirection becomes such an important aspect of this, of being a caregiver. So if hypothetically, though, redirection doesn't work, what is wrong with someone having a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning if they don't know it's morning, noon, or night anyway? And so also I want to share with caregivers. Elaine, by the way, was roughly for 8 or 9 years. I don't recall exactly where she lived at home with me. And then finally I couldn't really handle it anymore, and then into assisted living. And I want to just assume for a moment, let's just assume for a moment that I win the $1 billion lottery. And I say, okay, everyone who is joining me on this call with the University of Kentucky, we're all going on a cruise. And we're all going to the Caribbean on a cruise, and we're having a great time. But one of you falls overboard, and we throw you a lifeline, and you grab a hold of it, and you're ready to be saved. But the fact of the matter is the lifeline breaks, and then you drown. The point is that we caregivers are a lifeline to our loved one. And it's important for us to know and understand that. When I'm ready to go to print for the book, and lo and behold, I find a series of notes and journals that Elaine had been keeping since she was diagnosed. And so I went through those notes with my daughters, and each chapter begins with a firsthand understanding of what it's like to be diagnosed with this disease and continue living forward. There were, in reading those notes, I want you to know that we had prayed together and we had cried together, but never did I understand the courage that it takes to be diagnosed with this disease and continue forward. But also never did I understand how much she depended upon me to help her get through the early period of her life before she went into her own world entirely. Never did I understand how important it was until I read those notes. And so, caregivers, we need to understand something. We need to understand that we are a lifeline to our loved one, but we also need to understand that sometimes what we do unknowingly, you could say even stupidly, but what we do is we gnaw on that lifeline. We don't get enough sleep. We don't socialize. We don't get a chance for respite. We don't get enough exercise. We do all of the things that are harmful in life. And because we are doing that, we are in essence gnawing at that lifeline. And now it comes time to throw the lifeline to our loved one to help them. And they grab a hold of it and pray to God that lifeline does not break. Hopefully, we have come to understand it is so critically important that we caregivers take care of ourselves for a couple of reasons. One of them being that we caregivers, many of us die before our loved one. There's the cortisol, there's the tension, there's the unanticipated grieving, there is the frustration, there is the worry, the existence of the cortisol being because we are under threat and don't know. And so all of those develop health problems that affect us. And so what happens then is if we don't take care of ourselves, we maybe die before our loved one. But well, what happened was I have 4 children, and they had an intervention with me. And they said, Dad, we don't want to lose both our parents. You've got to take care of yourself. And that was extremely important in helping me understand the kinds of things that I might be doing better without guilt. We caregivers carry around a lot of guilt. And I think one of the reasons is that because this disease is regressive, I remember as Elaine is on her journey, we're on this journey together, that everything was, I think I'd have it mastered and everything was going fine. And then lo and behold, the next day it'd be something altogether different because there was a change and the regression of the disease took a place of what was better a comfort zone before. And what it happened was it was something that was just so well, you feel guilty because you can't handle it. So then what happens when you feel guilty? You don't go socialize as much. You want to stay and put more time in because you think by putting more time in, things are going to get better. And actually, we caregivers then are ending up being worse off because we lose our perspective and we lose our understanding of what this is all about. And that is trying to help our loved ones live their best lives possible. To also make sure that we understand part of our goal is to help we as caregivers live our best life possible as well. We caregivers have to understand that we're heroes. And I say that because it takes a special degree of courage and fortitude and patience and love and understanding. And also it's a process of grieving. I had a friend who who retired, and he retired, and lo and behold, one night he has dinner and he lays down and he has a massive heart attack, and he dies almost at the snap of a finger. And with him having passing away, well, there was a funeral. People came by and expressed their condolences. They offered their sympathy. But there was closure. There was closure. And what happens is we caregivers, we do not get closure. We see our loved one's mind die a little bit every day. And we have to understand and realize that that will contribute and does contribute to this whole matter of grieving. And so what I think we have to do is understand all of these different psychological impacts on us, emotional, sometimes traumatizing impacts, and understand then that if we're smart, we realize we can't do it alone. Now, particularly we men don't want to ask for help. You know, we can bat down anything. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you don't ask for help, it means you're giving up. To ask for help means you are not giving up. If we're surrounded by an enemy who wants to give us great harm, and we know that it's almost an impossible situation to sit and do nothing, that's not the answer. To try and get help, so that we too can in essence survive. And so by asking for help, it is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength, a sign of courage, a sign of boldness, a sign of not giving up, a sign that we want to try and help our loved one live their best life possible. Now, it's tough. It's really tough to be a caregiver. And in being a caregiver, we try and do our very, very best. One of the casualties of we trying to do our best, one of the casualties of not asking for help, of having a frayed lifeline, and that's irrational irritability. We caregivers work so hard to do the right thing, and our loved one is not getting any better. And so then now we begin to think, I am not doing it right. There's something that I am just simply not following through on. And it's well, what happens is we attack ourselves, but sometimes we perceive that we are being attacked by other people. Well, we can tell ourselves we're not worth anything, but if someone else says to us that, you know, and a lot of that is just conjured up in our own mind. And I want you to tell you that this irrational irritability has cost me friends. I had to buy more boxes of candy and flowers for people who innocently said something that I misinterpreted and where they meant no harm at all. And so as we look at this as caregivers, we do have, as I said, a realizable goal. We do have something where it does not have to be hopeless. And what we have is the ability to set the goal to help our loved one and ourselves live our best life possible. We get to the point where our loved one is with us and we know we can't take care of them anymore. Well, I want you to know through my counseling, I went and visited with the counselor, and she said, what's the problem? And I said, well, I want to tell you something. I said, I can't see putting Elaine into a nursing home. Well, she says, you're not putting Elaine anyplace. You are giving her an opportunity to be who she is now. Can Marty Schreiber's 24/7 nursing home care take care of her? Nursing home take care of her? No, the answer was not. I couldn't take care of her. I'd slept by the door at night for fear she would go out at night into traffic. I wasn't getting enough sleep because of that. And then I wasn't eating right, and I wasn't visiting with friends, and I was becoming cloistered, and all kinds of things that were just not healthy for anybody. And so as we look at this, to understand all of the aspects of being a caregiver, one of the challenges that I've run across, Elaine and I sometimes would have lunch in the cafeteria at their assisted living. And in having lunch one day, as we're having lunch, she began to cry. I said, Elaine, why are you crying? Well, she says, I'm crying because I'm beginning to love you more than my husband. Well, I didn't ask her what's wrong with your turkey husband. I didn't do that. But what that meant to me was, it meant to me that it is not necessary for her to know my name in order for our hearts to touch. Our hearts can touch by holding hands, by giving a hug, by singing a song, by giving a smile. You know, the poet saying, you know, I may not remember what you said, but I will always remember how you made me feel. And so we just do have such a great opportunity to, again, look at it as the goal being helping our.
Marty, sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind unmuting yourself? Sorry, you accidentally got muted.
All right.
Yes, we hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay, now I can start all over again.
No, you're good. To pick up where you left off.
Does the University of Kentucky have a basketball team? I think I said that. Anyway, and so I forget where we were. We were talking about the fact that I was saying how great of a program this is for the University of Kentucky, and the people within its environs. What makes that so important? And again, as I said, it's not a chicken casserole disease, and to be able to have the support and the kind of expertise to help us get through that ends up being so very important. So that's great, and I'm very pleased to be part of it. What I think I might do is just for a second. This is the book, my Two Elaines, and this. But by the way, I did self-publish the same book. I self-published the same book, and there are roughly 60,000 of those books in print. And of that 60,000, there's only 59,800 that are in my garage. But Harper Publisher took a look at that self-published book, and they said, this is important, and we think that it should go nationwide. And so let me just read you one or two excerpts from Elaine, from her diary. And I think through that, you're going to get a sense of what life was sort of like, or is like. So she wrote this diary, and this is her first entry, and it took the form of a letter to dear loved ones. And she writes, it wasn't until a few weeks ago that I really had to say, yes, I do have Alzheimer's. I had read of signs that indicate Alzheimer's, like getting overly upset for no reason and having trouble with names and directions. But I still didn't think it was a problem for me. But in hindsight, for too long, I've been getting lost driving, having trouble keeping days straight, and difficulties with names and directions and schedules. I still felt I could handle it. It won't get worse. But this morning, I started reading about the mid-stage of Alzheimer's in hopes of preparing myself better, but realized I'm not very far away. That is most scary, but I have to accept it. And so in the life of a person with this disease, there is a moment that I would call the pivot. And as you read Elaine's notes, which are the beginning of each chapter, you'll see that she goes through the periods of thinking she does have Alzheimer's or she doesn't have Alzheimer's. Also, you'll find out she says some very kind, gracious things to me. And I don't put that in here for self-aggrandizement. I put that in there to drive home the point on how important we as caregivers are to our loved one. And so while she did say those great, wonderful things, she also takes me to task because she says I'm keeping her captive much too much. And so she writes about that. And so now we get back to the pivot. I sort of think, because this disease cannot be stopped, I sort of think it's a blessing when the person withdraws entirely into their own world. Because until they withdraw entirely into their own world, they've got all of these doubts, these worries, these questions, these concerns, the need for a caregiver who understands this disease so we can join their world. So I guess whatever I could be doing for you, whatever I could be saying with my experience, I would say is, if you know, it's like I realize that you have to take a long journey through a mountainous area. And what I would say before you leave is, would you please sit down and visit with me a little bit? I've made this trip through the mountainous area, and there's a couple of things, if I could share them with you, maybe it might help make your life easier and better. And if that would be possible, that would make me feel very good. So within that framework, then, Terry, why don't we open it up for questions or suggestions or comments or ideas? And again, I want to thank everybody for joining us and tell you it's nice to be with you.
Perfect. Thank you, Marty. Actually, I have a question. I'm going to jump in before anybody else. Sorry. I got to the mute button first. Was there one precipitating factor that brought you to think that Elaine needed more care than you could provide at home?
No. It was a combination of things. First of all, my health was failing, and failing significantly because I wasn't smart enough to take care of myself. Then there was the intervention by my children. And then there was the realization, and this becomes so important. This becomes, I think, so important. I did not want to put Elaine into assisted living memory care. Why? Well, because I said, till death do us part. It was now my battle with Alzheimer's. It was my battle that was keeping Elaine from going into assisted living memory care. Well, that was foolish. The question was, what is best for Elaine? As my counselor pointed out, how do I help Elaine live her best life possible? And that was by going into assisted living. And so it came on slowly and it increased in speed as my health became worse. And I want to tell everyone that when you have to place your loved one into assisted living memory care, it's horrible. But I also want to sort of compare it when Elaine and I took our daughter our oldest daughter, when she was 4 years old, at kindergarten. You walk into that kindergarten room and, now this is your 4-year-old daughter, and, the daughter is crying, and, the mother is crying, and I'm sort of choked up and so forth. Well, you don't want to do that, but by the same token, you don't want the experience of the separation, but you know how important it is that they go into kindergarten so that they can grow and learn. And the comparison is, it's sort of like understanding that experience. Yes, I will cry. I cried when I took Elaine into assisted memory care, but the fact of the matter is, it was better for her. It was better for me. It was better for my children, for the grandchildren, for our friends, and so on. And yes, the toughest, but I'm glad I did it, because I was interrupting Elaine being able to live her best life possible.
Thank you. That makes sense. I never quite never quite heard the kindergarten comparison, but yeah, I get it. I remember those days dropping off my my kids at kindergarten that first time. Yeah. There's another question. How did you get over the disappointment of the mistakes that you made while you were caring for your wife?
Caregivers everywhere, we need to develop mind control. And shoulda, coulda, and woulda. And, it's the same thing, Terry, when we look at, raising children or working with coworkers and so forth. not everything is ever going to be perfect, but then to begin to understand that you try to do your best. And it was it still is a battle. It still is a battle to look back and say I messed up on moments of joy. I can remember when Elaine was diagnosed, the doctor said, Numenda and Aricept, and then socialization and going for a walk and a glass of red wine. That's what Elaine's plan of action was supposed to be. Well, we went for a walk, and I had to get this walk in within a half an hour because that's what my schedule called for. And so we'd be walking. Elaine's, oh, look at that beautiful flower. Come on, Elaine, I have to get going. Or we'd be walking along, look at the bird. So what happened was I missed out on moments of joy for Elaine. We could have had maybe more laughs, and we could have had maybe more of an enjoyment of each other, of appreciating things together. But I didn't do that. I got the message. Finally, I understood again about joining her world. And so, Terry, I still deal with that. And it's if anybody's got any suggestions on how we overcome that guilt and uncomfortableness about what we could have or should have done, and maybe me writing the book and maybe talking to as many caregivers as I can, maybe that's sort of doing a penance for what I could have done better for Elaine. But I also am thinking, well, I did try my best. I did.
Okay, hold on. There's another one. Elder maltreatment is especially high among those caring for older adults living with dementia, as high as 47%. Have you seen successful programs in areas across the country to help prevent this?
I have not, and I wish I could say I had, but to add to the concern of the person asking the question, in rural areas, it's especially difficult because of the distance of medical assistance and social support. And so I wish that there would be something that would be better. And I think, and maybe that, maybe this is not realistic, but I think if more people understand this disease and realize that the person who is asking these repeated questions or behaving in a manner which we think is just highly unusual and maybe even repulsive, if we can understand that that's what they are and deal with them on their level, it may cut back some of that elder abuse. That and also in the experiences that I've had with some of that elder abuse, it does basically come about because of lack of understanding. Now, here, elder abuse, we think about striking people or so forth, but when I would see caregivers argue with their loved one about whether they should have another blanket, well, you don't need another blanket. It's hot, is that elder abuse when you argue with them over something which is very, very realistic in the person in the mind of the person who is ill? I hope not, and I hope we can, develop the kind of better understandings. And here again, if there's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease by churches and by communities and so forth. And so maybe something is going to happen, but I am not aware of any specific kind of program which outshines any other.
Okay, got it. I really enjoyed reading your book, Marty. I really did. And if you'll indulge me in just one minute, you guys, I'd just like to read a little paragraph. And that paragraph just resonated with me. It was one of those paragraphs where it's like, oh, it just kind of hit the nail on the head. It's in his book, and it's on page 31, Danger on the Trail. Being an Alzheimer's caregiver takes a tremendous toll, but it happens in such a gradual way that you may not notice how harmful it is to you. Exercise? Eating healthy? Who has time for that? Managing your own health can be that one more thing you just can't squeeze into a day that's already filled up with doctor's appointments, newly inherited household chores, and possibly your own job responsibilities. I don't know why, but that just hit the nail on the head for me. It does sneak up on you.
Well, there's no question. I mentioned this irrational irritability sneaking up, and again, that's why I wanted to write the book, so it doesn't have as good of a chance of sneaking up on other people as it did sneaking up on me.
Oh,
so, and so.
Yeah. Marty, does anybody have any other questions or comments for Marty?
Terry, I put one in the chat.
Oh, sorry. You can go ahead. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. I didn't see that. I guess I'm not monitoring this very well. I apologize. Okay. Oops, that is not. So April, do you want to just go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. So I'm part of a coalition, I guess, for our dementia-friendly Lexington efforts. And you said that the disease is not a chicken casserole disease, and I totally believe that, and that's an excellent way to say that. But I wanted to know what would have helped you and Elaine early on as you were still going out in the community and trying to be involved. What would have helped you all better, and what was your community missing? Do you have any recommendations?
Well, that's quite a question. Because of my experience, I worked with the Alzheimer's Association and tried to develop a program with the cooperation of the medical profession and the Alzheimer's Association, so that when a psychiatrist, the doctor, would make a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, of dementia, that the caregiver or the loved one would sign a authorization form allowing the doctor to contact the Alzheimer's Association, so the Alzheimer's Association can in turn get in touch with the caregiver to help the caregiver be better grounded. I had mentioned that when Elaine was diagnosed, the doctor says 4 things: Numenda and Aricept, which are the 2 medicines, and then the socialization, and then the walking, and the glass of red wine. And so that didn't help me. And because I was ignorant, I really didn't know what I was up against, what I would anticipate, or what the challenge might be. And so what we also tried to do is to work with the pharmacies, so that they in turn would have a pamphlet at the door. I mean, where you pick up your prescriptions, to have a notice saying that, as a caregiver, are you struggling? And then have the number of the Alzheimer's Association, the phone number of the Alzheimer's Association, where they could give a call. But then also to try and get involved and get into as many churches and synagogues and parishes as possible. Just talking to them, and it's almost like hand-to-hand combat. I don't know if you can just make one simple announcement saying, hey, let's pay more attention to this disease and be more aware of it. I think it's like, well, we've got to get before the attorneys, bar association, we've got to get before bankers, life insurance agents, and so forth, so that they become aware of this. So that's a relatively long answer, other than I salute what you are trying to do, and hope that you have success. And if any of these programs that I suggested here about contact with physicians can be helpful, I can make sure you get that information.
Thank you so much, Marty.
Thank you. There's another question. It says, I am the marketing director for a dementia memory care facility. What are some things that staff members, like a marketing person, can do to help? Oops, I got to go down. Help families deal with the guilt of placing their loved one. Good question.
Yes. I think this, to ask the same questions of them, I mean, there's a number of things that can be done, but among the things which, and again, as I said in sort of my comments earlier, that the counselor had me understand that that I was not helping Elaine live her best life possible by keeping her with me, and also by in the end pointing out that it was my selfishness and my own pride that was keeping her with me rather than being interested in her own behavior. And then I think I might use the example of the 4-year-old going into kindergarten, and how, yes, it is going, absolutely, you're going to feel miserable. Absolutely, you're going to feel guilty. I understand all of that, but let's step back and look at this in a practical matter. And, what is happening with your own health, Mr. or Mrs. Caregiver? How are the children responding and so forth? And, how can, if you look at your loved one going into assisted living, think of the kind of difference it's going to make in the quality of life for your loved one, as well as yourself, as well as friends and relatives. So it's and I think each situation is almost quite different. There are some where all the children will agree. There are some where 3 will agree one way and 1 will be violently in the other way, and so forth. And so it's a matter of trying to have them basically understand. Now, if anyone has any better, let's not say better because that will make me feel bad, any additional ideas on some of these discussions, please join in. I can only share with you my experience. I am not a medical doctor, not a psychiatrist, and so forth. All I am is someone who lived this disease.
We do have a comment. Someone commented, "I know how he feels. We had to put our father in the nursing home because we couldn't take care of him because we worked. It took a while to get over it, but it will because it took a while to get over it, but will because we know we didn't have a choice."
And I think that's really what it boils down to understand that you don't have a choice. Gosh, think about someone who's really in a position for placement in assisted living. If they're home alone, or if they get off on their own, and you can't stop imagining the kinds of things that can go wrong.
Right.
You just can't.
All right. Well, if there doesn't anybody else have any questions or comments, I think we'll wrap it up. I really appreciate your time and your expertise, Marty, sharing with us today.
Well, Terry, thank you. And to everyone who joined us, I want to say I hope it was worth your time and energy to be with us. And if there's anything that we can be doing one way or another to be helpful to caregivers on their journey, I want to be involved in that, because that's my life. That's my life. So Terry, thank you. And to everybody, thank you very much.